It was a warm summer's evening in London. Sisters Bibaa and Nicole headed out to the park to celebrate Bibaa's birthday together. Unbeknown to them, there was a vicious killer that had been stalking them for some time, lurking in the trees behind them, and he was about to act on his violent urges. But it was what happened after the women's deaths that made this case catapult to front page news. The police officers that were given the task of protecting and preserving the dignity of the women's dead bodies actually did the complete opposite. They actually took photos of the women's corpses and shared them across group chats, and the things they said about the women were even worse. Sorry guys, this one is gonna make you mad. Today we're discussing the tragic case of Bibaa Henry and Nicole Smallman. Before we get into the case, I do just want to thank our sponsor for making this video possible, NordVPN. You might know if you follow me outside of my YouTube channel, I'm very chronically online. I'm sure a lot of you guys are too. And there is not a single time I access the internet without NordVPN enabled. I keep them with me at all times to make sure that all of my data, all of my information is protected and no one can get into it or hack me. It's amazing because you can use it on pretty much any device that you have. I have it on my phone, I have it on my laptop, I have it on my PC. You can put it on your tablet if you got an iPad, if you're an iPad kid. And I always say this, but I feel like a VPN is essential. Come on, it's 2024. If you don't have a VPN, what are you doing? There is so much internet out there that you could be accessing, but you're locked in the internet of just your own country. A VPN is absolutely essential for the work that we do on this channel. You know, researching all these different cases from all over the world. We need access to absolutely everything out there on the surface web. With a VPN, you can access websites, articles, and even whole entire platforms that aren't available to you in your country. But it's not just for research purposes. I mean, I use it a lot for research purposes, but don't worry, I work hard and I play hard. I use it a lot for my entertainment. I always tell people this, if there is one reason to get a VPN other than the safety, it's to be able to watch all the different streaming service libraries from every different country. Well, not every different country, but most of them. And it also works in the reverse as well. Say you're going out traveling, but you want to keep up to date with all the shows that are going on back at home, then you can. You can use your VPN to travel back home. But NordVPN have so many other perks aside from their VPN that make them the absolute king of the VPN game. They have a password manager, and God knows I need that. I'm terrible at remembering my passwords. It can help you come up with super strong passwords and store them all for you so you don't have to remember all your different ones. Their dark web scanner can alert you if any of your sensitive or precious? I meant private information gets out on the internet. If your details have been passed on in data leaks, it will alert you and then you can act accordingly. It's great because things like that you might never have known otherwise. And for you, my lucky ducks, NordVPN are offering an exclusive deal when you click the link down below in the description. That's nordvpn.com/Eleanor. It's 100% risk-free with NordVPN's 30-day money-back guarantee. And right now, if you buy any of their 2-year plans, you get an extra 4 months free on top of that. What an insane deal. Thanks again to NordVPN for sponsoring this video. We love you guys. Now, before we get into the case, I just want to give my usual disclaimer that I mean absolutely no disrespect to anyone that I talk about in this video. Everything that I'm about to say is publicly available information that myself and my team have found online and compiled into this one video. This video will cover a lot of sensitive topics as always, but some of the main ones to be aware of are racism and misogyny. So if you feel like that's going to trigger you or be a bit too intense for viewing right now, then do click out. Hopefully I'll get a chance to see you another time with a different video, but look after yourself. And while we make every effort to fact check our sources and make sure that all of our information is correct, no action should be taken in reliance upon the information in this video. And one last thing before we get started, sorry, you know I love to talk, but I do just want to take this opportunity to remind you all that these are real people's lives that we're talking about, so please keep it kind and respectful in the comments. All opinions that are about to be stated in this video are mine and mine alone. And with that being said, let's get into the case. So today's case takes place in northwest London in the summer of 2020. On June 5th, it was Bibaa Henry's 46th birthday, and it was a glorious sunny day. And so to celebrate, they decided to go out to the park, Friant Country Park in northwest London. Bibaa was going to be joined by a few friends and family, not very many, and we'll get into that in a minute. You might have noticed that this case takes place in 2020. COVID times, woo. Don't we all miss that? Hey. Anyway, obviously they couldn't have a huge group, so it was just a couple of friends and family, including her sister, well, her half-sister, Nicole Smallman. There was a 19-year age gap between the girls. Nicole was 27, and of course Bibaa was just turning 46. But they were super, super close. They were like best friends and sisters in one. I believe they actually lived together at the time of this case. Nicole was going to university quite close to where Bibaa lived, and she had a spare bedroom, so she was like, come live with me, sis. But of course, then the pandemic hit. And yes, we're gonna have to do a little bit of a pandemic recap. I'm so sorry. June 2020 in the UK was an interesting time. We weren't quite in full lockdown anymore. It kind of seemed like we were getting rid of the disease a bit. Disease? Is that correct? Or is it a virus? Or are they interchangeable? I'll Google it. So a virus can cause a disease. A virus is a pathogen that can cause an individual to develop an illness, but a disease is when the body's like composition is changed because of the disease. So yes, it's a virus and a disease in one. Lovely. Sorry, little science lesson. That was even a science lesson for me. So anyway, the government thought, or they said, that we were getting rid of the virus and it was kind of safe to start going back outside. They weren't pushing us all out like all at once, but they were like, okay, start fixing the economy now, please. They said that we could all meet up and go to restaurants. Oh my God, if you're in the UK, do you remember the Eat Out to Help Out scheme? Also, what a hilarious name, by the way. Eat Out to Help Out. It was basically, if you go eat out at a restaurant, you got like a certain discount because, like I say, they were trying to pump money back into the economy. But it'll come as no surprise to any of you that that made the virus? Well, we just established that it's both. It only made the virus spread even faster, and it practically reversed all of the progress that we'd made through that first lockdown, which is great. We ended up having to go back into 2 more lockdowns. Handled it so well here, we really did. But anyway, in the summer of 2020, we'd only had the one lockdown, and the rules at this point were that you were allowed outside, you were allowed to meet up with small groups, I think it was 6 or less. It had to be outside in a big open area, so a lot of people were choosing to go to parks like this, and you had to be socially distanced from other groups of people. It was still very restrictive, but it felt like freedom. I remember the energy in London, but in the whole country, that summer was incredible. Everyone was so happy, everyone was so excited to be back out, and we were having like the best heat wave at the time. It was so warm. So I imagine Bibaa Henry was buzzing about her birthday, being able to actually get out and see her loved ones and actually celebrate. So Bibaa, Nicole, and the rest of their small group all gathered in Friant Country Park at about 8 p.m. that night. The sun was still toasty and it was just about to set over the vast views of London. It sounds like a lovely little birthday. The group set up like a bit of a picnic blanket situation. They'd brought cushions from home and blankets and like cameras, and like they were really throwing a little bash, a little birthday bash. And they stayed up all night, just laughing, telling stories, and snacking and drinking. Well, when I say drinking, I don't know if they were drinking alcohol, but I'm sure they were drinking something. Have a bit of water, have a pop. Before they knew it, time had escaped them, and it was midnight now, and it was actually just Bibaa and Nicole. The rest of the group had dropped off as time had been going by. People were going to their different homes, but Bibaa and Nicole were having too much fun. They'd actually brought a big string of fairy lights, obviously as part of the decorations, the B-Day decks, and they had them on, and by now it had dropped dark, and they were like swinging them around in the air, taking photos of them with this like moving string of lights. The two girls were having the best time, just in each other's company. There is nothing purer than a sibling relationship, I find. Well, maybe like a parent and a child, I don't know. But I love my sister, basically. Hi sister, if you're watching this. Reading about this night that they kind of spent together, it made me feel all like warm and fuzzy inside. Like being a girl with a sister is an indescribable feeling. There is such a like united like womanhood, learning and growing together kind of vibe there. Oh, it's unmatched. I bet they were having a great time. But what the women didn't know was that they were being watched. As they were celebrating Bibaa's birthday, someone was stalking them from the trees. A few hours back, a man had spotted the two of them. I guess they were quite eye-catching with those fairy lights in the dark, and he had hidden in some trees to watch them. And he was about to approach them, but the women had no idea. The next morning, Nicole's boyfriend woke up and discovered that the other half of the bed was empty. Nicole had never returned home that night. So he checked his phone, but she hadn't even texted him, you know, like about a change of plans or about staying at Bibaa's house. She just hadn't contacted him at all, actually. The last thing that she'd sent him was a text from the night before of her just saying, "I'm dancing in a field," which is sweet. But since then, there was absolutely no communication with her. And so he tried calling her, but her phone just went straight to voicemail. He tried calling Bibaa. Again, her phone went straight to voicemail. He tried to check for Nicole on, you know, Find My Friends on the little location app, but again, her location had been like turned off. Her phone had been turned off while she was in the park. It either ran out of battery or had been turned off. But the point is, it wasn't still tracking her location, so that was a dead end as well. So the boyfriend starts calling around all their different friends and family members, asking if anyone had heard from Bibaa and Nicole since the night before, but no one had. It was totally unlike both of the sisters to be unreachable. They were both pretty good with their phones. In fact, Nicole was very good with her boyfriend, especially letting him know when plans were changing and where she was going and stuff like that. It was really unusual that she hadn't turned up home and also hadn't explained it. But the family did have some slight comfort in the fact that wherever Bibaa and Nicole were, they were probably still together. The families tried not to panic too much because after all, they are two grown women with their own autonomy. Maybe they just wanted to go out on an adventure. It was Bibaa's birthday, Boxing Day after all. Did that make sense? You know, Boxing Day, the day after Christmas, it was her birthday, Boxing Day. It was the day after her birthday. So maybe they had just like gone out and forgotten to text anyone, or maybe their phones died and they were just still having fun. Basically, their families were trying to remain positive. For the rest of the day, they kept trying the girls on their phones, kept texting them, kept calling them, but still going straight to voicemail. Their phones hadn't turned back on. Their loved ones drove out to their houses, well, to Bibaa's apartment, but she wasn't there, neither was Nicole. They spoke to everyone, pretty much everyone that the women associated with, colleagues, friends, but no one had heard from them. No one had seen them. They hadn't turned up at anyone's house. They had literally just disappeared. By this point, there were very few reasonable explanations left. I mean, the whole day, ever since they woke up and realized that they were missing, they had been hoping that it was going to be some sort of misunderstanding. They were just going to turn back up at the house and say, "Oh, sorry, our phones died. We were just out exploring." But by now, it was like 9 p.m. the next day. It had been almost 24 hours since anyone had seen Bibaa and Nicole, and it was clear that something was wrong now. Their mother, Mina, was worried sick. I mean, this was both of her daughters missing at the same time, and every awful possible situation was circling through her head. Could the girls be hurt? Could they be in hospital? Could they have gotten lost on the way home or something? Their phones died, so they couldn't use a map, and maybe they're just out there trying to find their way home. That evening, the family called the police to report Bibaa and Nicole missing. Their mother, Mina, gave over as much information as she possibly could. Photos of the girls, information about their location and what time they were at the park and things like that. So the police began an investigation, but shockingly, didn't even bother going to the park for a couple of days. That is the last confirmed location of these girls. That should be the first place that they're searching, should it not? When police didn't search the park that night when the family reported the girls missing, they kind of understood it. I mean, it was dark and it was probably easier to hold off a search until the next morning. But when the next morning rolled around and a search didn't begin, the families were now confused. Police insisted that they were working on stuff, but just back at the police station. And it's like, okay, fair enough. I'm sure there is a lot of stuff to be getting on with at the police station, but again, this is the girl's last confirmed known location. Confirmed and known mean the same thing. I just did a Mojo Dojo Casa House. As much as you don't want to assume the worst in situations like this, it does need to be on police's mind that murder is a possibility. And the park where they were last seen, it has a possible crime scene there. I don't know, they don't know. They haven't even checked, have they? But that's my whole point. How do you know? There could have been a crime scene at that park for the whole day, but the police wouldn't have known. They're working on these women's disappearances. They don't, like, that could be all for nothing. If you just check the park, they would find something awful. The girl's mother, Mina, was very disheartened with this investigation right off the bat. She felt like the police weren't helping them, and she had a sneaking suspicion that it was because of their race. Mina is a black woman. Both of her daughters, the missing people in question, are also black women. She felt like the majority of those white men police officers just didn't want to hear it. They didn't want to give her the time of day. They weren't putting in the same amount of effort and attention into Bibaa and Nicole's case as they would into a case of two white women. The whole family was just so disappointed and frustrated with the lack of urgency in this case, and so they decided to take it upon themselves. If police weren't going to search the park, they were. Well, actually, the park searching came a bit towards the end of the day. They had already spent the whole entire morning making missing posters, sharing posts on Facebook and other social medias, trying to make it go as viral as it can in London, just to see if anyone has any leads. They had been doing this in the meantime, thinking, surely the police are going to be searching the park today. They're doing everything that they can on their end, and then they realised that the park still hasn't been searched. So in that afternoon, they head down to Friant Country Park and do it them damn selves. By this point, Mina had already called round all the hospitals in the area asking if they had any records for Bibaa or Nicole, worrying that they'd been admitted. But no. So truly, at this point, they couldn't think of anything else that was worth doing other than searching that park. So they formed a bit of a search party, including a few of the people that were at the birthday celebrations the night before, because obviously they would be able to lead them to the exact spot that they had been celebrating and picnicking the day before. When they arrived, there was absolutely no sign of Bibaa and Nicole or any of their belongings there whatsoever. And they had taken a lot to the park with them that day. Let me reiterate, there were blankets, there were cushions, there were fairy lights, and of course all their personal belongings, their bags, their phones and purses and what have you. But all of it was gone. It was almost as if they had packed up their stuff to go home properly, you know? Did this mean that they had left the park? Maybe they had left the park all right and something had then happened to them after that. So they kept kicking around the grass and looking in the bushes, and eventually they found a pair of sunglasses. It was Bibaa's sunglasses. The glasses that she never went anywhere without. Well, not during the summer. Now, this doesn't necessarily hint to anything sinister happening. They are just her glasses. I leave stuff everywhere all the time. I have the memory of a sieve. But when her family found those glasses, they just felt that something wasn't right. Like I said, she never really went anywhere without them during the summer. And it just seemed weird that they would be able to pack up everything else, absolutely everything else, but she would leave her sunglasses. The things that you would think she's like wearing on her head or on her eyes. Well, no, it would have been dark. But I wear mine on my head when it comes to nighttime. So if she was anything like me, then I don't know, then there's no reason for them to be lost in the park, basically. So the search party keeps going. Now that they've found one thing, they want to see if there's anything else around. And very quickly, one of them made a horrifying discovery. A huge knife was found laying in the grass just meters away from where Bibaa and Nicole had been celebrating alone the night before. And this discovery completely shattered everyone's remaining hopes of finding the girls alive. They had already feared the worst, but this was just confirmation that something awful, something brutal must have happened to those women. But as they stood there and processed this, that immediate fear and devastation very quickly turned to anger towards the police, because they could have found this knife right away if they would have just searched the park. The fact that they waited so long to search the last confirmed location of these missing people, to the point where their own families had to do it themselves and had to be the ones to discover what looks like a murder weapon. And it was actually Nicole's boyfriend that was the one that found it, which is just fucking awful. This case is so heart-wrenching in so many different ways. I did mention in the very beginning that this one is going to make you mad, and it's also going to make you very sad. So, after the discovery of this knife, the family call 999, and the operator tells them to stop searching, stop what they're doing, don't touch anything else, and wait for police to arrive, and they will continue the search. Well, they have been waiting for police to arrive and start the search for 2 damn days. So did the family listen to this advice to stop searching? No, of course they didn't, because up until this point, the only progress that had been made in this case was because they were searching. So they continued to search. And that was when Nicole's boyfriend strayed a little further away from the group. They were kind of searching this field where the picnic had been, but there was a forest of trees right next to it. So he goes into there and he starts like poking around in the shrubs and the bushes. He was thinking that if that knife was a murder weapon, then what else could a potential killer, attacker, have ditched, you know, as they were fleeing the park? So he's looking for objects on the floor. But that was when the rest of the group heard him let out this devastated, guttural scream, and they just knew what he must have found. They all ran to find him, where he was already in floods of tears, screaming, pointing at something on the ground. It was his girlfriend's dead body, and curled up beside her lay the corpse of her older sister, Bibaa. Their dead bodies were covered in blood and intertwined with each other, almost in an embrace. They had definitely been posed by their killer. It was immediately clear how the girls had died. Like I said, they were covered in blood and there were visible stab wounds mainly to their abdomen, but especially on Nicole, there were a lot of like cuts and nicks to her arms. It seemed that she had really put up a fight with whoever had murdered the two of them. And so it really did seem that that knife that Nicole's boyfriend again had found, that was more than likely the murder weapon that killed his girlfriend, that killed his girlfriend's sister. And he had to be the one to find both of those things, not only the murder weapon, but their corpses. 27-year-old Nicole Smallman and 46-year-old Bibaa Henry had been stabbed to death in the woods on the night of Bibaa's birthday as well. That's one part of this case that really like gets me in the feelings, is that your birthday is such a happy, like carefree time. I don't know if it's just me, but I like everyone else to just like take care of me on my birthday. Everything's just all smiles and sunshines and rainbows on your birthday. And they seem to have been having the best night ever as well before that. It's just so tragic that it ended in such a brutal, savage attack. Finally, when the police arrived at Friant Country Park 2 days after they were supposed to, they changed this investigation from a missing persons investigation to now a double murder inquiry. Very quickly, news began to spread, especially throughout London, about this murder, and nobody could believe what they were hearing. Bibaa and Nicole were such loved and respected members of both of their individual communities. Bibaa was a social worker, a very, very passionate one at that. She was known to be quite a feisty one. Her mother called her a spitfire, but she was always kind, she was always welcoming, she was just confident, and she wasn't gonna make herself smaller for other people, you know? I love a woman like that. Nicole was a freelance photographer. She was very creative, super artistic, just a free spirit through and through. Both of the girls were known to be fun, outgoing, loud in the best way. These deaths were truly such a huge loss to everyone that knew the women. And now police owed it to everyone that knew and loved those girls to bring their killer to justice. So they taped off that whole area. It was now a secured crime scene, and they called in the forensic squad to come and take samples and all that kind of stuff before the bodies would be removed for autopsy. But this is where I have to divert from the case just for a little moment, bear with me, because I have to tell you about what two absolutely heinous, evil police officers did at the scene of that crime. Unfortunately, the actions of these two disgusting people are the reason that a lot of people know about this case. So hopefully this video can help to give a bit more rounded coverage on this case and to really show who Bibaa and Nicole were, because unfortunately, when a lot of people hear this case, they think of the two police officers rather than the two victims. But these two pigs, we're gonna name and shame them. If you're a YouTube viewer, we're even gonna put photos of them up, so hey. They were 48-year-old Denise Jaffa and 33-year-old Jamie Lewis. Both of them had been put in charge of guarding the crime scene, aka the women's bodies. They were meant to stand a few feet, if not a couple of meters, away from the bodies and just make sure that no one went over to them, no one disturbed them, no one was prying or messing with evidence. Just generally preserving the crime scene, but also preserving the women's dignity. That is a huge part of this, because that's what they were trusted to do, but that is absolutely not what they did. Instead, the two of them got out their phones and proceeded to take multiple pictures of the corpses. Not even just pictures, selfies as well. They were in the front of these photos with two dead bodies behind them, just posing, smiling. That is one of the most insidious things I've ever heard of. Why do you want that photo? Well, actually, I'll tell you why they wanted that photo. They sent it into a WhatsApp group chat with over 40 other people in it, and a lot of them were police officers. I don't know if all of them were, I don't know if it was like a work group chat, but I do know that there were police officers in that big group chat. And I believe the reason that this photo was taken was because the officers were asked in this big group chat like what they were up to. And so they took this photo, sent it into the group chat, and along with it they put, "Unfortunately, I'm sat next to two dead birds full of stab wounds," which absolutely knocked me speechless when I first heard that. That is grotesque. I can't believe that these words are coming out of another human being, like about another dead person. Like, how can you have it in your heart to talk about a dead woman like that? How can you stand there next to two completely butchered women? There was blood all over them, and they were posed by their killer as well. This is a very unsettling crime scene, like something out of a horror movie. But it's not a horror movie, it's real life. And this man proceeded to take a picture in front of these two women who had just recently had their lives snuffed out in the most horrifying way possible. This was so dehumanizing. And I just want to draw attention to the fact that he called them two dead birds, which is, oh my god, the misogyny on top of all of the other evil here. It's like it can't get any worse. If you're not in the UK, I don't know if they call women birds elsewhere, but it's like quite a derogatory term. It's used a lot by men here in the UK when they're just like referring to a bunch of like daft birds is a common thing I hear. You know, it's not a nice way to refer to women. I wouldn't say it's like the worst insult ever, and sometimes it can be used in a affectionate way, but more often than not, it's men talking with each other, talking about the women, you know? You get like some bird a lot, she's just some bird, which, ugh. But I just think the choice of the wording there as well, like he really does not see Nicole and Bibaa as two human beings laying there on the floor, does it? It is just abhorrent. But you will be happy to know that a couple of the police officers from within that WhatsApp group chat, they actually snitched on Jamie and Denise. They were immediately suspended from the police force. They were arrested and charged with misconduct in the police force. But it actually gets even worse for these two police officers, because once they'd been caught for this, they then, like, their employers wanted to do a full, like, background check and see what other things they'd been saying or doing that had been flying under the radar. And trust, there were some other shit. Turns out that these two had been evil fuckers for a long time. Denise Jaffa was very racist, especially towards Asian people. He would always use the P slur. And he actually, in one of his WhatsApp chats, bragged about covering up an attack against an Asian boy. Denise said that he had let 3 white fellas go after an off-the-record chat. Now, I don't know what that off-the-record chat is, but we can assume. We can assume that he let those 3 white men off because he is racist against Asian people. He didn't care about the victim in that case, and it didn't seem like he cared about the victim, well, in any of the cases that he's on. Thank God he was suspended. The two of them, Jamie and Denise, were both sentenced to 2 years and 9 months in prison, but they actually only served half of that. It's devastating, really, but thank God they will never be able to work with the police force ever again. Thanks for bearing with me on that tangent. I just think it's super important to talk about and to make people aware of. It's so sad that we can't trust our police force, isn't it? I just feel like there is not a single police force on earth that actually does well for their community. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. Please let me be wrong. If I am, please correct me in the comments. Does your country have a better police force than ours and then America? It's all fucking ridiculous. I think especially after the whole Sarah Everard case as well, where a police officer like pretended to arrest her or whatever just to get her in the car to kidnap her and kill her. It makes me sick to think about. Like the kind of evil, depraved shit that goes on in the minds of police officers, but then we give them so much authority over the rest of us. It's so scary how much power they have and how you never actually know what's lurking in the darkest parts of their brain. It's scary to think about, so let's move on. Bibaa and Nicole's autopsy reports were absolutely harrowing to read through. Everyone believes, like the pathologist and the detectives and everyone believe that Bibaa was killed first. She suffered 8 stab wounds and no self-defense wounds. It seems that her murder was quite quick. She probably didn't have a chance to react and to fight for her life. But Nicole, on the other hand, suffered 40 different stab wounds and incisions. I believe that was 28 stab wounds, and so the rest of those, 12, were self-defense wounds. It's believed that, yes, Bibaa was attacked first, and Nicole was probably trying to pull him off of her sister. And when he then turned on Nicole, she really put up a fight for her life, sustaining a lot of injuries in the process. Their deaths were placed between 1:13 a.m. and 1:26 a.m., which is a very specific time frame, I know, but you will see why in just a sec. The autopsy reports also revealed that the girls' bodies had been dragged, so, well, they had like abrasions and stuff all over their back, like little scratches and grazes. Seemed that they'd been dragged across the floor because, well, they were at the picnic spot, maybe that's where they were murdered, and then of course their bodies were found in the woods behind. So the autopsy makes it seem like they'd been dragged by their feet, actually, and their tops must have ridden up, so then all the branches, everything is like scratching at their backs. And like we said before, once the killer had got them into the woods, he proceeded to stage their bodies. He laid them in an embrace, like facing each other. It's interesting that there was extra effort put into how the bodies were going to be discovered, and I'm not quite sure what it means either. And that's me who's done all the research on this case. Well, no, me and my team, obviously, sorry. I didn't do all the research. But I mean, like, I have written this whole script, so I know everything that the killer says and does and all of his motives. Oh, pronoun reveal. And yet, I still don't understand why he staged the bodies like that. There was never an answer given. It just seems a bit sadistic to me. Well, more than a bit sadistic, but you know what I mean, like very disrespectful. It seemed that once the killer had positioned their bodies, he then proceeded to get rid of all the evidence, get rid of all of the picnic stuff, you know? Eventually, when a search of the park was done, all of their belongings were found. They had been thrown into the lake in the park. Their picnic blanket, their bags, their sunglasses, bank cards, their phones. And finding their phones proved super useful for this investigation because they could find out that someone had actually tried to access Bibaa's phone after the murders had been committed. The murderer was trying to get into Bibaa's phone, and the police think they know why. So remember, the sisters were playing with those fairy lights and like swinging them around and like taking loads of pictures, cute little artsy ones in the dark. They'd propped one of their phones up kind of with all their picnic stuff, and they'd put it on like a timer burst, so a photo would be taken every however many seconds. And police believe that one of these photos just missed the killer. He was about to be in one of those photos. Had one more been taken, because it was the very last photo of the set, had one more photo been taken, then they might have got a photo of the murder being committed. The photos were taken at 1:13 a.m., which is, remember I said that really specific like time window that the murder would have happened in. It's because of these photos and like the time that the phone was tried to be unlocked, but it wasn't successful. They believe that in that window of time between the last photo that was taken and between the unsuccessful unlock phone attempt, that was when they were murdered. And it is like a 10-minute span, something like that. But as I was saying, the very last photo in that burst set was taken at 1:13 a.m. and it shows both the sisters with their heads up looking in a certain direction. Both of them are looking the same way. And I mean, detectives on this case had to do a lot of work on that photo, so we can't say for sure. I mean, with AI and stuff now, maybe we can clear that photo up a bit more for you. But I have seen some versions where they, you know, they've tried to bring out the colours in the photo or whatever, and it really does look like all of a sudden both the girls are looking away like that. And police believe that it was that exact moment that was caught on camera when Bibaa and Nicole's killer came out of the woods and made himself known. That was them hearing him for the first time, seeing him for the first time. And maybe he had seen the phone go off that one last time, and so once he had finished the murder, maybe he wanted to unlock the phone to try to get rid of that evidence. And one more thing police found while they were searching the park was a blood-stained cushion. One of the cushions that they'd brought from home for this picnic. The exact same cushion can be seen in their photos from earlier on in that night, you know, when they're all just having a good time, they're all gathered round together, the sun's still shining, and then to see that contrasted with the blood-stained cushion. And even the slogan that was written on this cushion, it said, "Life isn't about waiting for the storm to pass, it's about learning to dance in the rain." And that in itself completely broke my heart. Just in general, it's a quote about living your life and how short life is, essentially, and how we should enjoy that little time that we have. And even the part about dancing in the rain, and the last thing those sisters did together was dance in a field. But it was seeing the photo of the cushion with all the blood on it. I don't know if we're going to show it in this video, probably not. If we do, it'll probably be like very blurred, just so that you can see like the colour contrast, I guess. But it was when I saw that photo of that cushion in my research. I don't often get choked up reading about these cases anymore. I have grown quite a thick skin to it. I'm still very, very sensitive to it all, but it's not practical to sit there and cry at my desk every single day. So I've kind of, you know, stopped doing that. Boy, when I saw the photo of that cushion, I just welled up. It's just so harrowing. I think it really puts into perspective how brutal the attacks were. There was so much blood. There is more blood than there is cushion. And actually, that brings me back to the forensic search of the crime scene, because interestingly, they found 3 different blood samples. Of course, the first 2 blood samples were Nicole's and Bibaa's. They were confirmed, identified right away. But it seems that Nicole, fighting for her life in her final moments, had injured her killer, and he had bled all over the crime scene because there was a 3rd unidentified blood sample. And who else is it gonna be? Police knew that this was an absolutely golden discovery to make in a case like this, because as soon as you suspect someone, you can just like take a little sample from them, compare it with the sample that you have from the crime scene, and you'll have a yes or no answer. So every single person that they suspected of being the killer, they would be able to find out so quickly and easily. But it turns out it was gonna be even easier than that. So for a little context, in the UK, we have what's known as the criminal database, and every country kind of has their own version. But in 2003, it was made a law that police are able to take the DNA of anyone and everyone that they arrest, regardless of whether they get charged or not. Just the fact that they have been arrested for a crime means that police can take their DNA if they want to. And more often than not, they do. So even if they don't need it for the case that they're like investigating, they will take that DNA and they will upload it to our criminal database. But obviously it'll say in there whether the person was actually a criminal or just arrested and then let go, you know. Either way, it goes into the database. And so we have this huge database of like loads of people's DNA for times like this, when you have an unidentified sample and you want to see if it's a match to anyone that the police are already aware of, you know? It's a super useful system because it means that a criminal only ever has to get caught once and then they'll just keep getting caught for the rest of their life. If they leave DNA over at a crime scene, it'll get matched to them in the database and they'll be arrested again. Well, that's the idea. It's supposed to minimize repeat offenders, but I'm pretty sure it does. But one of the best parts of our criminal database is that it actually shows up half matches. If it doesn't have a perfect DNA match, but it has one that's very similar, it will still pop it up because the chances are the person that you're looking for, who has a very similar DNA sequence, is a relative of this person that is in the database. So yeah, even if the killer themselves had never been caught for a crime before ever in their lives, if their dad has like robbed a store or something and given his DNA in, then they might get caught because of dad. And you guessed it, that's exactly what happened here. The system popped up a half match to this blood sample with some older guy named Mr. Hussein. I don't actually believe that Mr. Hussein was ever charged with anything when his DNA was taken. I think it was one of those cases where police just take it just to be safe. And they put it in the database and nothing had ever really come up about Mr. Hussein ever since. But when they input this blood sample, it's popping up as a very close match to Mr. Hussein, but it wasn't Mr. Hussein. Very important to note that it wasn't him, but it must have been a rather close relative of his. So from this point, every single member of the Hussein family, well, apart from Mr. Hussein himself, was a potential suspect to the police, but they didn't make that known to the family just yet. They'd already managed to pull up a bunch of CCTV footage from the street that Mr. Hussein lived on. A bunch of his different neighbours had like security cameras and stuff like that, so police went and gathered all of this. And the tapes from the night of the murder outside Mr. Hussein's house show something very interesting. A young lad is seen running up their drive and into their house with no trousers on, just a jacket wrapped around his waist. Now, what the fuck? This happened in like the early hours of the morning, so immediately it's weird, but it's also very suspicious. In fact, the lack of trousers could actually be some sort of evidence here. Maybe they were covered in blood, so he'd ditched them somewhere. The young lad on the footage looked very young, younger than Mr. Hussein, of course, and police had actually found out at this point that Mr. Hussein had a teenage son. So now, teenage son was police's prime suspect. His name was Daniel Hussein. He was 18 years old, and he actually had a bit of a notorious reputation with the police already at this point in time. He had previously been admitted to the PREVENT program, which is an anti-terrorism program here in the UK. They try to identify people that are at risk of becoming radicalized or at risk of, acting on their beliefs and their thoughts, and they try to prevent it before it gets any further. They try to neutralize the person. They do it with the help of a bunch of professionals. There's police, there's counselors, and, social workers, all sorts of people work in the PREVENT team. It's like a 360 approach to preventing terrorism before it gets to the point of committing acts of terrorism. Well, Daniel was referred to the PREVENT program a few years before this case happened. He was actually referred by his school when they found him searching a lot of weird stuff on the public laptops. Different news sources say different things, and personally, if I was to hazard a guess, I would say that he was probably on 4chan, because the reports say a lot of different things. Some say that he was looking at pictures of dead bodies, some say that he was looking at like really far right material, and to me, that all sounds like 4chan. I could be wrong, that is just my guess. But regardless, he was looking at some dodgy, dangerous shit on the school computers as well. How dumb. Anyway, the school ended up finding out, sent him to the PREVENT program. He was in the program for about 8 months, and I'm not entirely sure what they did with him. I think it was just like regular meetings and counselling and really getting to the root of it all, but I'm not sure like what actually goes on in those sessions. But point is, he was doing them for about 8 months and then he was discharged. The program believed that Daniel was no longer a danger to his community, and so they let him go with a follow-up session at 6 months and at 12 months just to check that he was still good. The 6th-month meeting rolls around. They think he's still making progress. The 12-month meeting rolls around and they don't see him to be a danger at all anymore. They believed that they had successfully rehabilitated the terrorism out of this guy. They didn't think that there was anything to worry about when it came to Daniel Hussein. But then a couple of years later, a double murder happens just down the road from his house. Well, down the road from his dad's house. He actually lived with his mother most of the time, and his mother lived in southeast London, but his dad lived in northwest, and this case happened in northwest. His dad's house was actually just a couple of minute walk away from Friant Country Park, the scene of the crime. It's all coming together so quickly. And Daniel's own father had admitted to the police that he had been worried about his son for quite some time. He always feared that police would show up at their door talking about some serious crime that his son had committed. And that day had come. Because Daniel had always been quite antisocial and even aggressive, even with his own family. In fact, mostly with his own family, because he didn't have many connections in the world. He didn't have that many friends. He didn't have a partner or anything. So his family saw his best and his very, very worst. Daniel Hussein was born on May 10th, 2002. He was the oldest of 4 siblings, and he never got on well with any of them either. He would fight them and scream at them regularly, and this went like way beyond any other sibling fighting I've ever heard of. The police had to be called on multiple occasions. Ambulances had to be called. What the fuck was going on? I actually couldn't find what that specific case was, but I have never heard of an ambulance needing to be called because of a sibling fight going out of hand. Like, these weren't normal sibling fights. Their mum's house that they all lived at was known as the loud, rowdy, like, screaming house down at the end of the street. But it turns out that most of the noise that would come out of their house was due to Daniel's explosive personality. His peers also didn't like him very much. He didn't have any friends at school, or many friends at school. I can't say any, I don't know. But he was known to be a loner. In fact, a lot of the kids at school described him as creepy and off-putting, which actually made me quite sad when I came across that in my research. Let me explain. At the age of 15, Daniel Hussein was diagnosed with Asperger's, which is a form of autism spectrum disorder. The term Asperger's isn't really used anymore. It was an old diagnostic term, but these days, like, if someone was to be diagnosed with Asperger's, they would just call it autism spectrum disorder. They don't really use that Asperger's label anymore. But when Asperger's kind of was a thing, it was known as the high functioning autism, which is, again, terms that we don't use. We don't use high functioning and low functioning autism anymore. Instead, you would now say that the person either has high support needs or low support needs. They can go about their day-to-day life with minimal support, or maybe they require extra support. Of those 2 different categorizations, Daniel had low support needs. His autism seemed to affect him more in the way of social situations, and he would get overwhelmed. And it seems, just through my research on this case, and you will see it very soon, it seems that he gets like very intensely obsessed with things, which is another trait of autism. And I think his autism really affected his self-esteem as well. That's just one thing that I've deduced from my research, that his inability to speak to girls especially really got him down. He was really insecure about it. And you know, that's why it made me really sad to read that the kids at school would describe him as creepy and off-putting. Then finding out that he had autism and he struggled with social situations kind of broke my heart. You've kind of got to imagine that it's someone else, not the suspect in a true crime case. But if you imagine that it's just a kid in a school that is really struggling to be social and they're really insecure about it, but they're trying, but all of their classmates are calling them creepy and off-putting, that broke my heart, honestly. But on the flip side of that, kids are kids, and maybe they just didn't understand that there was a reason that he wasn't quite as engaged and social as the rest of them. One of the ways that Daniel would cope whenever he got like overwhelmed was to literally just walk away. Just remove himself from the situation. And, you know, I'm glad he found a way for himself to cope, but again, other people didn't understand this, especially the kids at school. They saw it as rude, strange. As I mentioned before, Daniel really struggled to make and keep friends, and he really struggled to talk to girls, and he really desperately did want a girlfriend. He would look at all the other couples and wish that he could have that, but he just couldn't speak to any of the girls in his school. I personally get the impression that Daniel felt like he had very little control over his own life. Everything that he wanted, he felt like he just couldn't get. He was incapable of working his way up to achieving things. He was very frustrated a lot of the time. He felt very held back. He felt like he was just like playing the game on hard mode where everyone else had easy mode, you know? Towards the end of high school, Daniel spent most of his free time just locked away in his bedroom on the computer. He didn't have much else to do with his days. He didn't have friends and stuff, but, you know, this is already very unhealthy. And while I acknowledge that being in your room on your computer all the time is unhealthy, I do it anyway, so fair enough. But I think the problem lies in, well, the biggest part of the problem lies in what kind of content Daniel was accessing during those long hours where he was just staring at the screen. He was so deep into far-right extremism, racism, Satanism, and he was like always on the deep web looking at creepy, weird, dark shit. But of course, there was that one time that he tried to access that same creepy, weird, dark shit on the school computers. What the hell just came out of my mouth? Computers? Anyway, his school caught him and sent him to the Prevent program, which did think that they had helped him. They thought they had like rehabilitated him. Oh my gosh, guys. I need to like put myself on a factory reset. Just to jog your memory on the Prevent program, it's an anti-terrorism organisation here in the UK. They identify individuals that are at risk of becoming radicalised or committing horrific attacks or whatever, and they try to stop them in their tracks and neutralise them and tackle those beliefs from the very core. And like I say, they thought it had worked with Daniel, but you will soon find out that no, it didn't, not at all. It was later found out that throughout his time in the Prevent program, he was still accessing all that same dark shit online, all that far-right propaganda, extremism. The Prevent program wasn't doing much. But I think Daniel did get better at hiding it, because the Prevent program thought it was working. Daniel finished high school in 2018 and he signed up for a sixth form, but he never really went to it. His attendance was very, very weak. Around this time, which was like just before the murders actually, his dad was expressing to a neighbour that he was worried that his son had fallen in with the wrong crowd. And I wonder what he means by that. Like, obviously he means that his son is associating with kind of bad people, but in what way? I wonder if he meant like drugs or crime or violence or just, I don't know, other like teenage loners that look at far-right extremism. Yeah, I don't know who the wrong crowd could be, but I'll be honest, I don't think any crowd influenced Daniel's actions. I think they came from himself and from the internet. You will find out very soon, but I don't think there were any friends around him that were encouraging this. One thing I do wonder is how much Daniel's family knew about what he was accessing online. Because some families, like different families do it differently, don't they? Some families have a proper hold on the family computer and they will check the search history and all that. But other families, other parents don't really care what their kids are doing. They like let them have free, unreined internet access, which is very scary. But I mean, he was a teenager. I would have been pissed off if I was like 15 to 18 years old and my mum was still checking my search history, I guess. But anyway, especially going into the pandemic, Daniel was getting lost in some really strange rabbit holes online, one of which was demonology. And yes, in preparation for this video, I did have to go down the same demonology rabbit hole. Thank you so much, Daniel Hussein. I am never going to be able to delete this information from my brain. At this point in time, Daniel was becoming a bit of a fanboy for this particular social media influencer, shall we call him. He had a social presence on a lot of different platforms, mainly talking about demonology and, well, just like other like spiritual things. He was like a social media influencer, but like an evil one. He was a flat out Nazi, a fascist, a Satanist, an extremist. He ran a forum as well as a YouTube channel dedicated to discussing satanic rituals and black magic. The guy's name was E.A. Coetting on YouTube. His real name was Matthew Lawrence, but I think for the sake of this video, we'll call him Coetting. He would post videos and content about the Satanist group that he was involved in called the Order of the Nine Angles. And this group has a long, ugly history of committing and encouraging vile acts in order to appease Satan and other demons. Members of this group have committed acts of terrorism, sexual violence, committing human sacrifices. That's right, the Order of Nine Angles actively encourages murder. If you want to get what you want from Satan and the demons, they encourage making a pact, making a deal, offering something to the demons, usually a human sacrifice, and then you can ask for something from them. What the fuck? And this is real as well. Like, this is a YouTube channel, just like this one that I'm on. A person got on there and said, right, so today, guys, we're gonna murder someone and we're gonna ask demons for stuff. It's mad. It's genuinely mad to me that goes on the same platform that I clock into every day. Here I am at work, and so is this guy on the same platform as me, actively encouraging murder. What the fuck? Well, no, I say this guy's on the same platform as me. You won't be surprised to hear that he has been taken down. All of his like social media profiles and stuff no longer exist. Coetting's videos were especially pivotal in this point in Daniel's life and this point in his deteriorating mental state. I think once the pandemic hit, his mental really did start to deteriorate. Well, all of ours did, but his in a very dark and disturbing way. Daniel would watch Coetting's videos all day, every day. He idolized this man. And honestly, that man idolized himself. He was so far up his own arse. He had a course called something like How to Be a God. What was it? That wasn't the actual name. I'm gonna find the name. Oh, Becoming a Living God. That's it. Because he genuinely thought he was all powerful, and he was telling his followers, you can be powerful too. You can ask for whatever you want from the demons. You know what? It's very similar to those like girly pop manifestation videos where it's like, honestly girls, if you just write this in your journal, you can manifest anything. He was that, but evil. He was like, if you make a pact with Satan and sign it in your own blood, then you can have anything you want. And oh my God, it's just clicked in my brain. Do you think he committed like some sort of like human sacrifice, horrific act to like manifest his YouTube channel? Oh my God, that's just speculation. I don't know, girl, but Coetting really made it sound like anything was possible if you just appease these demons. And Daniel believed him, and he followed his tutorials to a T. Coetting taught his followers to offer up something to the underworld that they would want. Can't be something shit. And of course, given who the recipients are, you know, the most evil beings on Earth, well, on Earth? Where are the demons? Where do they keep the demons? In hell? Yes. Yes. But anyway, what I'm saying is, basically the things that they would offer to the demons and Satan are exactly the kind of shit that you would imagine. Human sacrifices, things like that. And do you see where this is going? I'm sure you see where this is going. Daniel discovered these videos during lockdown, and in 2022, he was in a very, very dark mental place. He was very vulnerable. He was already struggling in his social life. He felt like he didn't fit in. Girls didn't want him. He just felt like he had no control over his life and over achieving his desires. And then comes along this like Satanism mentor guru kind of fella telling him that he can have whatever he wants, anything, everything that he could possibly ever want. All he has to do is murder someone to appease a demon. And with that, everything fell into place for Daniel. He felt like he had found the solution to all of his problems. Daniel was desperately looking for a place to fit in, a community of his own, because he didn't have one at school really. And unfortunately, he ended up finding his community on Coetting's forums. Daniel was always talking in these forums. He said that he was a psychic vampire at one point. He was asking other members for tips on how to make his pact with the demons. But not to worry, because his favorite YouTuber, E.A. Coetting, had made several tutorials on how to make the perfect pact with Satan. I'm imagining it with like royalty-free ukulele music in the background. So guys, today Coetting made videos about how to make the perfect written agreement, like a solid contract between you and the underworld. And police would soon find out that Daniel had followed those instructions to a T. But right now in the investigation, let me kind of just like bring you back to earth, because I just went on an absolute tangent explaining who Daniel Hussein was. But remember, right now, police don't actually know that much about this teenage boy. All they have seen is the CCTV footage of him running home with no trousers on, remember that? So police grabbed a few more bits of CCTV footage from the street because they wanted to properly consolidate his movements from the day of the murder. And they found that he actually left his house that night at 7 p.m. Bibaa and Nicole were murdered after 1 a.m. So what? I wonder what he was doing for hours and hours and hours. Maybe just like stalking the park, looking for potential victims. Maybe it just took him a long time, I don't know. The CCTV cameras around his home didn't really show anything else more interesting. I guess they already got him leaving and coming back. But police did track his movements in the days running up to the murder. And boy, did they find something. On June 3rd, so 2 days before Bibaa's birthday, 2 days before the murder, Daniel Hussein had walked into his local Asda supermarket in Colindale to buy some essential bits. He got a few drinks, some gum, some candles, some lemons, and a block of kitchen knives. So police are looking at this and they're thinking, right, so we have proof of him buying the murder weapon 2 days before the murder. And you know what, when police actually tracks down like the model of this block of knives, that knife that was found in the park by Nicole's boyfriend was a match to the kind of set that he would have bought in Asda. For police, this was the last straw. That was enough evidence for them to be able to go and arrest Daniel Hussein on suspicion of a double murder. So in the early hours of July 1st, 2020, the police show up at Daniel Hussein's mother's house to arrest him for Bibaa and Nicole's murder. When they took him back to the police station, officers noticed that he had some pretty nasty injuries on his hand. He had stitches in his fingers and all sorts. Well, we already know that Nicole had been fighting her attacker, fighting really well, to the point where she had made him bleed all over the crime scene. So his injuries were now looking very consistent with the physical evidence that they had at the scene. So there's actually a video of this on YouTube, which I don't think we're going to be able to put in, unfortunately, copyright, but hey, I'm here and I'm gonna talk you through this video because I watched it and it was actually quite funny. The way that Daniel like reacts to things, it feels like a comedy sketch. The guy behind the desk asks him how he got those injuries on his hand, and Daniel pretends that he didn't hear it. He's just like looking around. And so the officer asks again, and Daniel was quiet for a second, hesitant. In fact, I would say speechless. He didn't know how to respond to this. And eventually he goes, "Wait, is this an interview?" So the officer's like, "No, it's just a question. How did you get those injuries?" And Daniel looks down at his hand and just kind of gets stuck there. He just stares at the injuries on his hand in silence. And the seconds are going by. Honestly, the silence in that video was deafening. And in that situation, I bet every single person in that room was thinking the same thing. Like, this is definitely the killer. And Daniel's probably thinking, shit, 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 shit. Finally, after 13 seconds of silence, yes, I counted it. After 13 seconds of silence, he looks up from staring at his hand and says, "Oh, I was getting robbed." And at this point, the police officer just kind of cut him off. He was like, "It's fine." Like, he didn't even want to hear it. He knew that this was a fake story. It just took him 13 seconds to come up with, "Oh, I was robbed." The hesitation told the police everything they needed to know. They didn't need to sit and hear a fake story from him. So they carry on, like, asking him just the routine questions to get him checked in. And they asked him how he was. Daniel hesitated again. And then first he said that he felt cold. And then he said, "I'm in shock, man, to be honest. I'm really confused and scared." But police were already 99% sure that they had their guy. I mean, by now they'd actually received even more evidence through different reports of suspicious purchases on Daniel's accounts. On the same day that he'd walked into that Asda store to buy the block of knives, he'd also placed an order on Amazon for a full-face balaclava and 2 folding shovels. To dig a grave? ? He got them on next day delivery, Amazon Prime, a balaclava, and then the very next day, Nicole and Bibaa would be savagely murdered in a park by some secretive stalker. Now that police had Daniel Hussein arrested, they raided both his mother and his father's house, and they found a wealth of information. In his bedroom, there were a bunch of satanic symbols and sigils, all printed on poster paper. Classic. That's exactly what my bedroom walls looked like when I was a teenager. I'm joking. That's obviously a joke. Mine were obviously covered in One Direction. Of course, Daniel had learned to make these sigils and symbols and things from his very favourite influencer, E.A. Coetti. There was also a book of spells on Daniel's desk. And this is not like the cute, gimmicky Urban Outfitters kind of spell book. I've even got one of those. One of my friends got me one for my birthday. It's like 42 spells for self-love and manifestation. No. This spellbook found on Daniel's desk was full of dark shit, like how to get power over people, how to defeat your enemies. But the maddest things, by far, that police found in Daniel Hussein's bedroom were 2 handwritten contracts written by himself and signed in his blood. You probably saw this coming a while back, but yes, Daniel Hussein had followed the instructions of his favourite YouTuber and he had created 2 different pacts with 2 different demons. The 2 different contracts were for different things, so I'm gonna start with the less interesting one. He addressed this one to Queen Byleth. Well, Byleth is actually the king of hell. I don't know why he put the word queen in front of it, because honestly, this really spun me out in my research. I was trying to Google who Queen Byleth was for ages, and all that was coming up was a cartoon, like a video game character. I don't know if Daniel had just confused something there, or if I'm confusing something, or if, because you will see soon in the next contract, he addressed that one to King something something. So maybe he was just putting king and queen on the start of different demon names. Either way, this letter that was addressed to Byleth was actually Daniel asking for a girlfriend. Something that he had wanted for ages and ages and ages, but never been able to get himself, because girls didn't seem to really want to talk to him. It was a very specific girl that he was asking for, I assume just a girl at his school that he had a crush on, and he asked for Byleth to make the girl believe and see that he was the only one for her. And a pact like this would be enough to give a girl the ick at the best of times, never mind that he's already being investigated for a double murder. Like, yeah, that'll do it. The first contract to Queen Byleth seems quite harmless, like quite simple, you know, I don't know. That one did actually seem a bit like a manifestation kind of thing. But the other one couldn't be more different, couldn't be more horrifying. This one was addressed to King Lucifuge Rufacal. And in this one, Daniel essentially promised to become a serial killer, making regular human sacrifices to this particular demon. Now, this demon, Lucifuge Rufacal, is the Prime Minister of Hell. Which is funny. That's objectively funny. What do you mean you're the Prime Minister of Hell? I wonder if the citizens hate him in hell, like we don't really like the Prime Minister, you know? But basically, this contract was laid out in 2 sections. So at the top, it was like agreement to King Lucifuge Rufacal. And in the first section, Daniel wrote everything that the demon would get out of this pact. Everything that he planned to do for him. It's basically just the terms and conditions of his serial killings, like the rules, and it was written in bullet points. So the first one was that he promised to perform a minimum of 6 sacrifices every 6 months for as long as I am free and physically capable. He then clarified that point just below, saying that he would sacrifice only women. He then promised to build a temple for the demon, and he then promised to do everything that he had promised. A double promise, an extra promise. So that's the first half of the agreement, and I just want to pause for a second before we get into the second half, because that is a hell of a lot to digest. He was promising to a demon that he would murder 6 people every 6 months, all women as well. I don't really know why. I don't think that bit was ever explained, but I cannot believe that this was a written agreement. And I can't believe that he thought he was actually going to be able to get away with this, because I'll just tell you now, Bibaa and Nicole were the only murders that he managed to commit. But the existence of this contract implies that if he hadn't been caught for Bibaa and Nicole's murder, he would have gone on to kill and kill and kill and kill. Who knows how many murders this boy could have committed, all with the help of his favourite YouTuber as well. What an insane element to this case, by the way. Anyway, back to the agreement. So the first half was everything that he was going to give the demon. The second half was everything that he wanted in return. And this was obviously the main reason that he was making this pact. This was everything that he was willing to murder for. The first bullet point on his whole list was that he wanted to win the Mega Millions Super Jackpot. That's right, his first ask for a deal with the devil was to win the lottery. But that wasn't all he wanted out of the deal. Don't worry, there were a couple of things that he asked for. He also asked that he receive fruitful rewards in return for the future sacrifices I make to you. The rewards could consist of wealth and power. I think that's nice of him to make a little suggestion there at the end. Like, he don't quite know what he wants. He's like, yeah, just surprise me. Either of those will do. You could give me a bit of wealth. You could give me a little bit of power. Maybe a little bit of both. And just actually circling back to the first part of that point, receive fruitful reward. Sorry guys, I really cannot say that bit. I've really struggled in filming, so I'm just gonna leave it. Receive fruitful rewards in return for the future sacrifices he makes. So yeah, he really was planning to go out and commit several more murders, and he was hoping to, I don't know, win the lottery because of it. That's insane. And then Daniel's final request to the demon was that he make sure that he was never suspected of any crimes by the police, and also that the police will never know of any crimes that I have done and that I will do. That's his writing, guys. That's not me just being a confusing speaker. That is his writing. Make sure that he's never suspected of any crimes by the police, and also that the police will never know of any crimes that I have done and that I will do. I don't know. He's basically saying, don't let the police find me, please. And of course, at the end of this contract, it was signed in his own blood. He had written his name in his own blood. And it was actually in cursive writing, which was, you know what, I'm not gonna lie, it was kind of impressive to me. It is really weird. Like, this whole situation is really weird, and I'm not saying it's not, but is that not a talent to write in cursive in your own blood? Maybe. But anyway, now that police had found these contracts with demons, they understood his motive. Well, no, they didn't understand it. This is a very hard case to understand, because he clearly wasn't in any healthy mental headspace. There are very few people that could understand why he thought that making a deal with the devil to murder 6 people every 6 months would win in the lottery. Like, that's not an understandable thing. But, you know, even though none of us can really actually understand why his logic was like that, at least now they understood Daniel's clearly very deluded point of view. These contracts had given so much more context to his strange behaviours. Like, think about the shopping trip to Asda, you know, when he bought the block of knives, and he bought, like, a lot of seemingly random stuff as well. There were a few drinks and chewing gum, which I think is random, don't worry. But there were also candles and lemons. The candles were definitely involved in all of this because E.A. Coetting in his YouTube tutorials would always tell his followers to write out the contracts and the agreements by candlelight. So Daniel was probably stocking up for his contract writing session, his journaling session. And then the lemons, right. This one, I have a theory on this. This has not been proven or confirmed or anything. Daniel's never said why he bought the lemons, but I have a little theory, guys. Well, actually, it's my boyfriend's theory. He actually does a lot of YouTube videos about, like, hunting ghosts and communicating with spirits and stuff. And of course, in that kind of line of work, you have to be careful about demonic entities. And he knows a lot of different, like, rituals and things that you can do to protect yourself and protect your space. And he said that lemons are used quite a lot, actually. They're used to ward off spirits from attaching to your home. They can be used to assess the paranormal energy of a room. There's a lot of different things that you can do. Like, if you get a lemon and you put it in a cup of water, if it sinks, it means something. If it floats, it means something else. I don't know. He did tell me a bit of it. He told me just enough for me to understand it. So I guess that's a theory. If he's into all of this, like, demonic, spiritual, like, paranormal stuff, maybe. Maybe it is a stretch, but like I say, it is just my own theory. I just thought it was quite interesting. Maybe the lemons actually had nothing to do with the murders. Maybe he just likes a little lemon wedge in his water bottle, you know? So now police have Daniel Hussein in custody. He is arrested on suspicion of the murders and police are ready to interrogate him. They want to dig into his brain and find out what the hell is going on in there with all this demonology stuff. But when he sat down in the interview room, Daniel was not letting them in. He was very, very closed off, very uncooperative with police the whole entire time. He just constantly denied everything, denied the murders, he didn't know who the women were, he just sat in silence. Even when police asked him for the password to his phone, he actually declined to give it them, which, come on, they're the police. They're gonna get in there anyway. I guess they were just kind of asking him just to be polite. Like, you can either give over the password or we will hack into the phone. But, you know, Daniel didn't want to give over the password. And that's because he was still accessing all this, like, super far-right material and stuff, and obviously E.A. Coetting. Finally, after police had gathered all of the physical evidence that they could, they put together a rough timeline of events of the night of the murder, and I'm going to run through it for you now. As we know, Daniel first left his home at 7 p.m. that night, which is crazy. That's at least 5, if not 6 hours before the murder, and we have no idea what he was doing in that time. But what we do know is that around midnight to 1 a.m., he is in Friant Country Park under the cover of darkness and watching Bibaa and Nicole. Unfortunately, they were very eye-catching, as I said before, playing with that big string of lights. They were dancing, laughing, having fun, talking to each other. They were probably some of the only people left in the park that night. Just them two and their future murderer. Daniel had locked on to the 2 women as his chosen victims. He already knew how this night was going to go down, but right now, they were completely oblivious. It's believed to have all happened very, very quickly. Daniel approached the women and began a frenzied stabbing attack. It's believed he first started stabbing Bibaa, she died first, and then he turned on Nicole. She fought him and tried to protect her sister and protect her own life, but unfortunately, Daniel overpowered the 2 of them and murdered them very, very quickly. After stabbing the women almost 40 times between them, Daniel then proceeded to pick them up by the feet and drag them into the wooded area of the park to conceal their bodies a little bit more. And we know that he then posed the women's corpses in an embrace, which, again, has never been explained. Some people have suggested that this could be a slight sign of remorse. I don't know, I really don't see Daniel Hussein as a remorseful person. People saying that he's, like, trying to give them a nice little ending or whatever. What the fuck? What the fuck? He's just murdered them. This is not... I don't know. I will never understand these kind of, like, little last acts of respect quote unquote, that murderers do with their victims. I'm like, that's not respect. If you respected the victim, you wouldn't have fucking murdered them in the first place. I don't know, if anyone can make a bit more sense of why he might have left the bodies like that, please do chime in. I'm really interested to hear like theories. Anyway, once he had murdered the women and positioned them how he wanted them to be when they were discovered, he then proceeded to get rid of all of their belongings, the whole picnic site. He tried Bibaa's phone, he couldn't get into it, and it like locked itself, you know, when you put your passcode in too many times and it just completely disables. And so in the end, he just threw everything into the lake. The blankets, the pillows, the phones, the purses. And then, when it came time to leave the crime scene, Daniel took off his own trousers. We are presuming that they were covered in blood, but they've never been found, so I don't know, your guess is as good as mine. Maybe he just was a bit warm. And I'll be honest, I can't tell you what would draw my attention more in that moment, because he was obviously, if they were covered in blood, he didn't want people to see the blood. But if I saw a guy running down the road with no pants on, that would draw my attention more than a guy running down the road with like a dark stain on his pants, you know? But either way, he runs home with no pants on. He's taken his jacket off and like tied it around his waist just to cover himself up. And he's also hiding his hand in his jacket because it's very badly bleeding. He made it home by 4 a.m. and probably tried to clean himself up a bit once he got in, washed the blood off himself, and then he just went to bed, hoping to wake up the next day and be able to act normal and try to get away with his first ever murders. But of course, his chopped up hand was quite hard to ignore, like, especially now that the adrenaline had worn off, it was in a lot of pain. Daniel asked his father to take him to A&E to get it treated, and I have no idea what he told his father. But anyway, his dad drove him to the hospital. And of course, the doctors had a lot of questions. They have to ask questions about suspicious looking injuries like this that look like some sort of violent crime. They have to kind of probe the person a bit. And actually, Daniel gave two kind of different versions of a story to two different doctors. He told one of them that he'd been jumped by a group of lads, and then he told the other one that he'd been mugged, which, yes, are quite similar, but they're different enough that why did he even do that? Like, I can't understand. If you've already told one story an hour ago, how is it changing within the hour? It's just strange. I think the doctors had to write these things on the records, but no one actually flagged that the stories weren't quite consistent. The hospital just stitched him up, treated him, and sent him on his way. Over the next few days, Daniel Hussein laid low and stayed quiet. But of course, he was expecting big things. He was expecting the Mega Millions jackpot. He had fulfilled a part of his bargain, so maybe King Lucifuge Rofakal had fulfilled a part of his bargain. So over the next week or two, Daniel proceeded to buy lottery ticket after lottery ticket, trying to fulfill the prophecy that he was gonna win the Mega Millions. But not a single one of these tickets was a winner. I mean, of course they're not. Of course they're not. We knew that they weren't gonna be, but I would have loved to have seen his face when he checked the tickets and they were actually a loser. A loser? A losing ticket. He is actually a loser. Unfortunately for him, his plan wasn't working. He was now a double murderer and no better off for it. Over the next few days, Daniel has a lot of time to just like sit and think about the whole thing. And I think he realized a few places where he slipped up a bit. And so he spends a lot of time around this point trying to correct his mistakes. So think about the Amazon order that he made of a balaclava and 2 shovels. That's going to be on his credit card. That's on his Amazon account. That's got his name on the damn package. So he tries to fix this issue by calling up his bank and saying that he doesn't recognize some of the transactions on his bank statement. He said that he thought his card had been cloned. Someone else had his information and was also using his card to buy things, like balaclavas and shovels for a grave. I don't know. To be fair though, I will give him it. That is kind of clever. Clearly not clever enough because they realised in the end that he was the murderer, but honestly, I wouldn't have thought to like call up and cancel my card and say that someone else had been using it. I don't know. Police ended up arresting and charging 18-year-old Daniel Hussein about a month after the murders, and his trial took place a year later in July 2021. At this point in time, we were in another COVID wave, and apparently it was actually really bad in Daniel's prison. There was a huge outbreak of it on his wing. And so he wasn't actually allowed to leave the prison. They were all kind of in quarantine. So he was doing his sentencing and his trial from like a video link. And do you want to know what he pled? Guilty or not guilty? I'll give you a second to just guess. Not guilty. He said that he was not guilty. They have your blood at the scene, my guy. He said that he was not guilty of these murders. To be fair, he had been sticking with the story the whole time. He vehemently denied every single allegation against him. He said he wasn't there. He had no idea who those women were. It wasn't him that killed them. And all I have to say to that is, yeah, right, Mr. Running Home with no pants on. It was brought up at one point in court where obviously he's denying being there and everything, and they're like, okay, so how was your blood at the crime scene? And he was like, well, that's where I was mugged by those guys. Do you remember I was mugged by those guys? But even he can't get that story straight, so of course they don't believe that he was mugged by some guys in the exact same spot. How would his blood have ended up on those women's bodies? Was he mugged over the top of the bodies without realizing that they were on the floor? No, of course not. It is ridiculous. And his behavior throughout this trial, and obviously remember, he's not actually there in the room. It's just like a live video of him. He is being so disrespectful. He kept smiling and smirking and laughing at some of the things that were being said in court. He was playing with his COVID mask, like pinging it, throwing it up in the air, catching it. Just like naughty school kid at the back of class kind of energy. Meanwhile, this is his double murder trial. He is going to prison probably for the rest of his life. And this is how he's choosing to act in court. He wasn't taking the court proceedings very seriously at all. But I'll be honest, at this point in time, I think he realized that his life was over. There was no chance that he was going to get off for this murder. He was going to go to prison for the rest of his life. So really, at this point in time, what does he got to lose? Does it really matter if people hate him and think that he's a disrespectful, horrible person? Probably not to him, because he's gonna go get locked up in prison, and that's just his life forever until he dies. At the age of 18, he had committed one of the worst crimes imaginable and was about to be locked up for the rest of his life. When he'd barely even entered adulthood, any hopes that he had for his future, anything that he ever wanted to do in life, all of it was snuffed out. Just like he had done to those sisters. As part of his court trial, Daniel had to go through a lot of different psychiatric assessments to figure out if there was any mental illness going on, because honestly, it kind of looked like it. But no, no, they determined that he was completely mentally sane. There were no disorders, no illnesses. The only thing that they did acknowledge in court was that Daniel had been diagnosed with autistic spectrum disorder. And that's it. Not a single other diagnosis. Well, not when it comes to his mental, anyway. His defense didn't really have anything. And it was a really tricky case for them to fight, because obviously Daniel was vehemently denying it all. But there's his blood at the scene. I don't know. Spare a moment for those lawyers, because how the hell do you try to fight that case? Oh my God, one thing I forgot to tell you about Daniel's behavior in court. So, he's been like a naughty school kid, flinging his COVID mask. He was swinging on his chair and everything. At one point, I think it was a paramedic or something that was giving a statement in court. Daniel puts an L sign up on his head. That was the paramedic that was the first to arrive at the scene when the bodies were found. I don't know why on earth Daniel did that. I don't know what would have provoked him to do that. Whatever. I wanted to tell you regardless. Daniel's behavior in the trial has been described as despicable, just like his crimes. And in the end, he was given a life sentence with a minimum of 35 years. He will be 54 years old before he's ever even considered for parole. But it really scares me to think that he could ever be free. I really, really hope they don't free someone like that. Someone that is willing to murder two strangers in cold blood for the chance at winning the lottery because a demon says so? What the fuck is that? I would be slightly more open to him being let out of prison if they had found that it was mental illness making him think all that. But no, this is a sane man, supposedly, that thinks that you can make a deal with the devil to sacrifice 12 people in a year and then you'll win the lottery. In fact, police believed that Daniel could have gone on to murder even more people that night. The night that he murdered Bibaa and Nicole, he could have kept going on a rampage, but they believed that he didn't because Nicole put up such a fight. She injured his weapon-wielding hand, so he couldn't hold a knife anymore. He couldn't kill anyone else that night. So who knows? Even though she sadly couldn't save her sister's life or her own life, maybe she saved a lot of other lives that night by fighting so bravely. And that is all I have for this case. Thank you so much for watching. It's been a very long, very heavy one, so do a little mental health check with yourself. I hope you're doing okay. Thanks again to NordVPN for sponsoring this video. Remember, if you click the link down below, there's an exclusive deal waiting for you. That's nordvpn.com/Eleanor. And remember, right now, when you buy any of their 2-year plans, you will get an extra 4 months bonus for free on top of it. It's amazing. Don't miss out on that deal. But yeah, thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a thumbs up or leave a comment down below. Engaging with this video in some kind of way helps to push it out on YouTube, and me and the team would be so grateful for that. We have put so much work into this episode, and you know, we put a lot of work into every episode. I will give me and the team that, hey, but this one especially was a bruiser. I have been living and breathing this case for the past like couple of weeks, especially all that demonology stuff. I am gonna have to rinse my brain out after this. But yeah, leave us a comment down below. We always love reading the comments and seeing what you guys are saying about the episodes. We really appreciate the direct feedback. It's great, and it's just lovely to hear from you all and be able to put like names to the numbers. You know, I can be like, oh, it's Jessica. So Jessica, where's my comment? I'm joking. Sorry, I've blabbed a lot at the end of this video. If you want to watch another one of my videos, there should be one on screen right now for you to just click on, or if you want to subscribe to my channel, there's a circle with my face in. Click that, subscribe. We post new content every single week. It's always a party over here, but like a really weird, creepy, kind of devastating party, but still a party nonetheless. Anyway, bye. God, I'm blabbing.